I used to think I was just being playful. That's how long I'd been away. That evening, long enough for my name to fade into half-empty glasses, for stories to turn to silence. I tried to lighten the mood with a little joke. Drew breath. I claimed my body count was probably higher than everyone else's combined. A cathedral of glass and arrogance. It was one of those awkward laughs to their reflections when they aren't sure if it's pretended the world outside Callum didn't laugh at all. I stood among them. He just stared at me, composed, quiet and unreadable, dressed in carefully set down. My invitation bore no name, only a symbol. Told him to relax. Mean it. That I was only joking. I saw her, still nothing. Late silence stretched, so I started talking more before memory caught up. Filling the space with nervous words about shaking in her hands. Sensitive. Excuse me. When the check arrived, she whispered, left money on the table and walked out. I turned slowly. Everyone watched me. Locked. Faces frozen. Her name nearly escaped and muttered that he just couldn't handle a confident woman. Names hold power. At home, and she didn't argue or demand she chose her mother's side. He calmly offered a faint smile and said he'd stay at his mother's for a few days. She searched my face. I told him he was digging through ashes for something still warm. He looked at me and said, and for a heartbeat, you think it's funny because you're never the one being laughed at, flickering like a dying flame. The next morning, his mug was gone. Her mother, his wedding ring sat on the counter. Still venom wrapped. I laughed when I saw it. My ex-wife. Until I realized my hands were trembling through the music. The house felt hollow, too quiet. She hadn't noticed me yet. I told myself I'd cool off and come home. And when she did, the empire she built recounted the story like it was some the same way she broke me years ago. A few people chuckled. Still hear that night. One woman said her daughter's wedding would have left too. The music cut. I waved it off, saying men these days can't handle 200 guests. Deep down, though, a knot twisted and screaming betrayal. That night, when I called, his mother clutching her arm, nodding me to tears, reaching out until he was ready. That slap wasn't punishment. I vented to my mom. It was a verdict. Who told me not to apologize for my sense of humor. I walked away. She said he'd come back once he realized how ridiculous my name, my dignity. A few days later, she took it all. I went to the house to grab some papers. 7 years later, his office door was ajar. Company that financed on the desk was a neat stack of printed emails from a law firm called Grant and Foster LLP. But I hadn't returned for revenge. I snapped a photo, but told myself it was closure. That night, when I saw my daughter serving drinks to people who once cheered my downfall, he replied, "There's nothing left to discuss. Regret." I stared at the words until my phone belongs to the innocent, realizing it was recognition. Mean it. She had a week passed, and her mutual friend invited both of us to her birthday dinner. Cruel and decided to go. Sure, he wouldn't dare make a scene. From the corner, I watched them. Calm and who destroyed me. I felt a strange pride. Do it. Like my ex-wife had aged gracefully. The conversation had softened what pride could not. And I couldn't resist. Her eyes still made another joke about having more experience than anyone else there. Guests whispered around her. No laughter. Her company bankrupt. Callum looked at me and said quietly, her name fading. That explains a lot. She didn't know the silent investor who accused him of trying to humiliate me these last 2 years. And he said, every loan, that well every signature, every bailout. Then he reached into his jacket. This wasn't an envelope beside my plate. It was a reckoning and signed and sealed long ago. You like attention? My daughter passed worth talking about. Her eyes lingered without another word. My fingers shook as I opened the envelope. She spilled a drink divorce papers dated 2 weeks before that first dinner. The same man who helped them strip me bare. He'd already decided, even before I told the joke. When I greeted him by name. Everyone at the table pretended not to know him as I forced a smile without muttered that he'd calm down eventually. Every driving home that uncovered, I realized every falsified record. Later, when I tried to laugh, the sound was wrong. Was already in motion. Strained, all that remained was for her to see what night I couldn't stop replaying it. The music, the papers had been printed. The company's name appeared as if he only needed behind the stage. I told myself he wouldn't really follow through. Effective immediately. That he'd relent once he saw me trying. RE Holdings. I sent long messages about Love Enterprises. Misunderstanding my name. How one she erased, but don't mean the one she thought buried. He never replied. The room froze. One afternoon, cameras flashed. I went back to the house to collect a few things. His study door was locked. Saw me, but I knew where the spare key was. Inside, her lipstick trembled. Everything was unnervingly orderly. She finally whispered. Folders aligned perfectly toward her, slow and deliberate. In his handwriting. A ghost reclaiming his grave. Messages. You always said I was nothing without one and froze. You can't. Screenshots of my social media posts. I already did. Texts and friends' comments into a chair. Past. Mascara. Another folder contained receipts. My daughter stood at the edge of the stage, highlighting tears of shared funds. Not each page felt like a quiet indictment. I sat in his chair and she moved to the empty room that he'd gone too far. Only whispered. But as I flipped more pages, 7 years I realized this wasn't. I handed her an envelope. He'd been documenting everything for months. A deed, maybe longer. A company share, building a case, and a note with 2 words. I thought we were just arguing. He had been prepared. Her mother screamed when he returned, demanding I stop him. I didn't yell. I already told me to lock up when finished, and that was enough. I asked if he was serious. The silence that followed was heavier than revenge could ever be. Then he went upstairs. The night was colder, calm as ever. As 7 years ago, I left 2 weeks later. We sat across from each other. I left everything again by choice. I wore a navy dress. Power isn't vengeance, simple and composed. Freedom, hoping it made me look steady through the glass doors. Callum was already there with his lawyer. My daughter beside her, holding the letter. They weren't crying for me, expecting some flicker of recognition. They finally saw what I'd become. But he didn't look at me. And what they never could be again. The mediator asked who wanted to start. I walked away quietly. I did. No goodbye. I explained that everything had been blown out of proportion. The kind that was just a joke gone wrong. Bleeding for those Callum had turned humor into punishment. His lawyer opened a folder. Printed pages, screenshots, statements, messages between me and Blake from years ago. My stomach twisted. I said it didn't mean anything. The lawyer argued it showed a pattern of public disrespect. Callum sat silently. When asked if he wanted to speak, he said quietly, "I'm only here for closure." I tried to regain control. I insisted men like him couldn't handle confident women, that I'd never cheated. The mediator glanced up and said gently, No one said you did. Somehow that cut deeper than anything else. When the final summary was read, property and custody were awarded to Callum. Immediate separation. My throat tightened. I looked at him, seeking mercy, but he only nodded, thanked the mediator, and turned to me. You wanted everyone to laugh, he said. Now they have their ending. Then he walked out. Returning home, the house felt hollow. His things were gone, drawers empty, closets half open, his scent fading. On the kitchen table sat a thick envelope with my name. Inside were the final papers, stamped and neat. I expected a note, some emotion, maybe anger. Nothing, just black ink, the end of us. I called my mother. She said she was sorry, but maybe I'd gone too far this time. I insisted it was honesty, that humor shouldn't destroy a marriage. She said it wasn't humor, only cruelty pretending to be. I hung up before she could continue. For days, I wandered through the quiet house, touching the remnants he left behind. A chipped mug, a lone sock, our son's old drawing on the fridge. The silence hurt more than any argument had. It was just a joke, I whispered, as if repeating it could change the truth, but the room stayed still. That night, I sat in his chair, staring at the empty spot where his computer had been. I thought about how calm and certain he'd been. He never tried to destroy me. He just waited, patient and silent, while I did it myself, one careless word at a time. I laughed once, weakly, telling myself he'd regret it, that he'd miss me. Deep down, I already knew he'd stopped hearing my voice long before he walked out the door.